What's the difference between ChatGPT and an AI agent? A lot of talk out here about agents and what they actually mean for your business. Let's take some time to clear this up real quick. So ChatGPT is really great at answering questions, right? If you need to generate some text, if you need to do some content, ChatGPT is amazing at that. It's a super smart assistant, but it doesn't actually do something for you. So you ask ChatGPT a question, it gives you an answer. You ask it to generate an article for you, for example, and it generates it for you. AI agents, on the other hand, are things that can actually autonomously go out and do things on your behalf.
Thank you guys for clicking on the video and checking us out. This is the first video of maybe a podcast, we don't know, but we're just going to have a conversation and see where it goes. By the way, I'm Curtis Wilson from Huntsville, Alabama. Some of you guys may know me. Some of you guys will get to know me. This is going to be a conversation about entrepreneurship, maybe a little fatherhood, brotherhood, but I do got a guest here that I respect tremendously. I'm going to let him introduce himself. He's going to talk about a little bit about himself. And then we're going to dive into, like I say, some entrepreneurship things that I endeavor in as an entrepreneur. And we're just going to go from here. So this is Mr. Patrick Bentley, but like I say, I'm going to let him talk about himself, a little bit of who he is.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the introduction, my brother. I'm Patrick Bentley, and I am a creative technologist, I think is the best way to describe it. So I have been working for Google Cloud for the last 4 years. I'm a global business lead there. So I spend a lot of time working on developing really advanced training for some of our largest customers.
Wow.
And in addition to that, I also run my own business.
Okay.
So I have a business where we focus on developing custom AI solutions for mid and small businesses, man.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of it, man. I've done a lot of things over the years. So before Google, I worked at Amazon Web Services. I've been in technology for probably the last, 11 years of my life.
Wow.
Several businesses, some of them good, some of them failures, right?
Not considered failure.
But yeah, man, I mean, I love solving problems for people. I love starting businesses and running them. And I've learned a lot over the years about, how that works, man.
Right.
And a lot of it just been brute force, bro. Just failure, man. So yeah, man.
Right.
Happy to be here.
Well, as y'all can hear, he likes to use the word failure. I don't like to use the word failure, man. We just call them learning experiences.
Yeah, well, I don't see failure as a bad thing.
Right,
Man.
right.
I think failure is kind of a part of the path, man. You know what I
Right,
mean? Even if
it
you
is.
think about going to the gym, the best sets are when you work to failure. You know what I mean? Like you got to see
True.
how far you can go.
Right.
And every time you reach your limit, right, your limit actually gets a little bit longer,
That's
right?
true.
Like your endurance gets a little bit better.
Right.
And so, I don't see it as a bad word.
Not at all, man. Not at
Yeah.
all. And to get those muscles you talked about, you got to tear the muscle
Yeah, you
to
gotta
let it grow
get
back.
some damage, man.
There you go.
Gotta have some damage, bro.
Right.
So yeah, man, that's a part of the game.
Right. Well, I love it, man. I love it. So why did I bring Patrick on as my first guest, per se? And he talked about working for Google and AI components and things of that nature. So what I want to dive into is I do Airbnb short-term rentals. That's my forte as a full-time entrepreneur. And I'm going to dive into how I got there because I did used to work for the government. I transitioned out of government to do work for myself full-time as an entrepreneur. I've been doing that for probably about 2 years or so now, full-time for myself, but I've been an entrepreneur for a little over 7 years. But I want to dive into the short-term rental space for those that are familiar with it and how that works, and how what Patrick has to offer and how we can bring the two together to expand it even more. So he talks about like AI components and agents of that things, which I have no idea that language, but that's why I brought him on. But if those that do know about short-term rentals and Airbnb, it's not passive. I know a lot of people like to think that it's passive mailbox money, and it's definitely not that. As my audience and Patrick and several people that have understood or studied that space highly know that. But in Airbnb and short-term rentals, we talk about things like interacting with the guests, sending messages and things of that nature, automated. Patrick has a solution, as he talked about solving problems. He has a solution in his component of where we can merge the two to make that streamline and grow that even more effectively. So I want him to kind of touch base on
Yeah.
this AI component that you're coming up with within your space.
Man, I would love to talk about it, bro. I love talking about that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's where I spend so much of my time on my day job. And truly, bro, I can't stress enough how big of an opportunity we have right now at this moment. And this is going to be one of those times that maybe like in a history book, they're
Okay.
going to talk about this moment,
Oh.
right? Like, this is a very big moment, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
maybe I'll start there. Maybe I'll start by just talking about like my belief about where we currently are as it relates to business.
Okay.
So there are all of these different kinds of inflection points that, like, when you look back, have changed everything that we know about business, man.
Right.
So something as simple as like Ford creating the Model T and creating an assembly line,
Okay.
right? So you think about that. Before that moment, right? Like, there were cars, but they were expensive. Nobody really used them for business. Most people did their shipping and logistics around horse and carriage,
Okay.
right? But then Ford creates the Model T, and cars become less expensive than they had ever been,
Okay.
right? And so now you got kind of like these two categories of businesses. You have those that buy cars, right? And then those that don't. So the thing is that as more cars hit the scene, changes the whole industry, right?
Right.
Like, now shipping times become shorter,
Right. Okay.
right? Shipping things becomes cheaper, right? And then now your customers want to get their things faster. So the companies that adopt the Model T, they own the industry. The ones that don't, in a couple of years, they don't even exist anymore.
Right. Case in point, I think about like Blockbuster or Redbox or things. They didn't want
Yeah.
to adapt rather
Yeah.
to the change, and
Yeah, they
now
don't
we're-
exist
they
anymore,
don't
right?
exist
And so, I
anymore.
mean, and if you think about that era, right? Like
Right.
that .com era, right? Websites weren't a thing, right? Like, I remember a time when there wasn't really an internet, right? Like, when
Mm,
there wasn't a website. Now every business must have a
must have.
website,
True.
right? Like, if you
True.
don't have a website, you might as well not exist, right?
Mm,
And the companies that were moving first on that were the ones who were able to take advantage. Or even if you think about like the iPhone, there were no apps before the iPhone, right? And not only that, there were no like GPS enabled services. There was no on the go connectivity where we were checking our emails
right.
on our phones and like all those kinds of things. And look at how that just completely
And that
changed.
happened fairly fast.
Bro, that happened in 2007,
Right. So
right?
we're talking 18
18
years
years
ago.
ago.
Wow. Wow.
Completely changed, right? And so
Right.
again, a lot of businesses kind of went extinct, right? And but on the positive side of that, there were a lot of smaller companies that were able to now like jump over these larger competitors, because the larger competitors thought that their space was safe.
Mm,
They thought that they were in an unassailable position,
right.
right? And so there were smaller companies that saw the opportunity, right? And they were able to take that and like take advantage of the moment, right?
So I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad he said that because I and he as well and one of those smaller companies. So I'm trying to get in front of it now because as Airbnb short-term rentals, that whole space is shifting, or people are starting to transition back to the hotel space. Okay, where do I stand out? How can I scale? How can I grow?
Yeah.
So hooking up with somebody like a Patrick about what he's talking about,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get in front of that now so I don't be on that left side of a small business that crumbles. So
Yeah, I appreciate the
continue
plug,
that.
man.
Yes.
Appreciate the plug. So, all right. So here we are again, right? AI is going to change everything about how we do business,
Okay.
right? In ways that we don't even fully understand yet,
Okay.
right? Everybody at this point, or many people, many business owners are using Chat GPT or Gemini, which is Google's generative AI tool.
Okay.
And it's actually much better. You know, not saying that just because I work for Google,
Right.
it literally is better.
Okay.
But yeah, so a lot of us are already using generative AI, right? Using AI in our work stream
What
right
would
now.
be like a simple example
Oh,
of that?
yeah, simple example is like writing proposals
Okay.
or
Okay.
drafting email,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Like, and getting Chat GPT to do those kinds of things for us,
Okay.
right? But much in the same way that we only use 10% of our own brains, right? Like that kind of stuff is really just 10% of the actual capabilities that you can have, right?
Okay.
Like when you're, or what you can get something like a chat GPT to do, right?
Okay.
But something's happened over the last like year or so that you're going to start hearing a lot of people talk about. And this is the idea of AI agents, right? And so that's really, to me, what is going to change business, right? So like chat GPT is really good for an end user, right? But
Right.
chat GPT and all these other like what I just call chat bots are not really good for like multi-step complex things that require them to have intimate knowledge about your business and your processes, right?
Right.
And they need to be able to connect to your data. Chat GPT can't do that, right? Like
Okay.
you can kind of load, documents into it to give it context, but that's not really what we're talking about. So agents is really where now we can kind of go from just like this chat bot where we can ask it questions and it gives us answers
Right.
to more like, okay, now let's use that brain, right? Let's use chat GPT as a brain, but then now let's give it a body. And now it can start to go out and like do things on your behalf and make decisions autonomously based on rules that you give it.
Okay.
Right?
So, for example, I'm trying to connect the dots with
Yeah, I'll give
what
you
I
a
do
great
with
example.
short-term rentals.
Yeah,
And you may use a different example, but
yeah,
if you can use this one to help me understand.
yeah, man.
So, for example, let's say I go to ChatGPT
hmm
under the Airbnb short-term rental space, and I say, create a checklist for me
hmm
of checkout instructions for my guests before they check out. What's a
Really
good
great
checklist?
example, man.
Yes.
Really
So that
great
it's
example.
going to spit out, okay, make sure the guest locks the door, make sure the guest turns off the light. Those are
Mhm.
simple checklists that are pivotal for and vital for the business, and that's all Chat GPT is going to give me.
Yeah,
How is that going to
yeah.
change that as a whole from what
That's
you're
a
talking
really
about?
good example,
Okay.
man. So that's a good start.
Okay.
Now imagine that you could connect Chat GPT to like the messages that you send your guests over a period.
Hmm.
So you could like download all of the messages in Airbnb that you send, all the conversations that you've had with your client,
Right.
right? And you could put that into a database, right? And have that database sitting over here. And then you could have Chat GPT, right? Like then go to there, look at all the different conversations that you've had,
Wow.
right? And you could even give it examples of checklists that you've
It's
sent
already
to
done.
people
Yep.
already over time. And then it understands not only the checklist, but it understands the way that you communicate, your tone,
Mm.
right? And it's able to replicate that. And then you could also connect it to the internet because maybe there are things that you're missing,
Yes.
right? So maybe the way that you're doing it, there might be a better way to do it, or there might be some things that you're not thinking about,
Right.
right? So you could actually create this multi-step thing where you say, okay, not only do I want you to create the list, but we could say, all right, I want you to go and look at past examples of conversations that I've had,
Okay.
right? And I want you to create a list. Then I want you to go out to the internet and see what other people, what other kinds of lists Airbnb owners are creating and what their checklists look like, right? And some of the past mistakes that they've had, and then refine that to-do list to make it better. And then as a last step, I want you to send it to my Airbnb tenants
Directly.
directly,
Wow.
right? And you could do all of that, right? Like programmatically. So ultimately, an agent is really just a way for you to chain together all of those prompts, right?
Right.
So all of those things that you're doing in Chat GPT, there's a way for us to like chain those together so that we can create this multi-step problem solving, but
Right.
using this really powerful brain, right?
Hmm.
That Chat GPT or Gemini has, right? These large language models. But then in addition to that, you can connect it to data sources.
My goodness, man.
Yeah.
And the language that Patrick is talking about here is still going over my head, but I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah.
And from a business owner, a small business owner, someone whose time is very valuable, I can imagine the amount of time that's going to save me not only interacting with my guests, but also repetitive
Yeah.
of going across the board of feedback from different guests and clients. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so something like that, will it be user friendly for somebody that's a small business that have no idea of how to
Absolutely.
interact? Because
So
I know with Chat GPT, simple process once I got used to it, but
yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing, it can give you a whole bunch of information that's irrelative, which can cost you more time in the long run.
Yeah, man. So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
Right. So when I usually work with the client, right, like it sounds like a lot of technical work, but that's really more like the plumbing.
Okay.
Right. So what I would do is if I work with you, I'm really asking you questions about like, okay, well, how do you do this now?
Okay.
Right? Like, where are you spending the most time in your business doing repetitive tasks? Right?
Right.
Where would you like to be? Where would you like to alleviate some of that time?
Right.
Right? Like, or what are the activities that generate the most money for you? Right?
Okay.
And then what's the process for you to do those things? And how can we then like replicate that and automate that
Right.
so that now instead of just Curtis, there's 10 Curtises doing that.
Hey,
You know what I mean? And so
that'd be
like
huge.
that's really what it's about.
Okay.
Right? It's really me asking you really simple questions.
Right.
How do you do this? What is the value of that? What's the impact of that?
Right.
Right? Like how much time does it save you or how much money would it generate you?
Right.
What's the data that's really important for you? How do you want to get the output? So like what format do you need it to be in? Do you need it as an email? Do you need it as a Word doc?
Right.
You need it as a like what do you need to see it as, right? How do you evaluate it? Like how do you know when it's good?
Okay.
Right? And those types of questions are what I would ask you. And you give me all of that. I like using the term tribal knowledge, right? So over the years, right, like you've built inside of your head all of this information that you have,
Right.
right? And now, if I ask the right questions, I can get that from you, and then we can now replicate that, right? And we can automate that, and we can take all of that information that you have, and then we can use that in like 100 exit or 1,000 exit, right? Because now we can supplement it with the internet. We can supplement it with Chat GPT, which has already been trained on the world's information.
Right.
Right. And so you can actually
tailoring it specifically to your niche.
yeah, and
Wow.
you're tailoring it to specific use cases, right? And
Wow.
your specific industry. And so that's the power, right? Like so that is the potential in where we are now is that I call it industrial grade solutions, right? Like Chat GPT as most people use it, you know, number one, they don't even always know the correct way to like prompt it.
And
Right?
that's
They don't even
probably
really
me.
know the right way because there are like specific methods
Right.
and like practices that you can do to get a better output from Chat GPT,
Okay.
right? But that's kind of like the small part of it, right? Like the big opportunity is really creating these like industry specific solutions that you can either use inside of your business or if you're really, really entrepreneurial, you can take these and turn them into a product because likely the problems that you have,
Right.
there are 100 or 1,000 other people that have that same exact problem and they'll pay you
Now,
and solve that problem.
how can you mention the word product? How would you take that type of internet service,
Yeah.
which you know in my small brain is digital,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
turn it into a product? Like,
Yeah, so it's just a digital product, right?
okay,
Then you put a paywall behind it, right? And you or in
okay,
front of it and you say, look, I'm gonna charge you $50 a month for you to have access to this
got
thing.
you. Okay,
Right.
okay.
And that's how, you know, this is how new companies will be born.
Wow.
Right. And this is the competitive advantage that we're talking about, right? So not only can you operate your business better, but you may even find new revenue streams by using AI to create products that solve problems that are very specific. But you're the exact kind of person that I would want to partner with on something like that because you have all the industry experience and
I appreciate
information.
that.
You
Right,
know what
right.
I mean? So yeah, so that's the opportunity, bro, and that's what an agent is.
Well, yeah, well, I look, like I told you before, we've had this conversation offline for you guys that may be inquiring, and I'm definitely going to partner up with you on that because, like I say, I know in my industry, in my space, it's going to shift.
Yeah.
And I have to figure out a way to shift with it. So what you're explaining to me, yes, some of it is still going over my head, but I get the overall concept of it
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
So something like me, that for a small business like me, would you say something like that is very expensive? Or, you know, I know expensive is relative. And
Yeah.
we're going to dive into kind of all that, maybe not on this episode, but in future episode of what's just expensive and value and things of nature. But just for service purposes, would you consider something like that very expensive to acquire
Yeah,
and
man.
implement?
So I think it kind of depends on what level of implementation you want, right? So I'm kind of giving you what I would call like the blue sky,
Right, right,
like,
right,
you know
right,
what I
right,
mean,
right.
version of this, right?
Okay.
there are definitely some smaller steps that a company could take.
Okay.
Right. Typically when I'm talking to customers or, potential customers,
Mhm.
I focus less on price and more about value.
There you go.
Right. So it's less
you go.
about what this costs you and more about like what it does for you.
Right.
Right.
I'm
So,
glad you're touching on that.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Is it like if it's important enough, right? Then it's either going to save you a lot of time,
Mhm.
which of course you can put a dollar amount on your time, right? Like
Mhm.
even though time is, priceless, but if
Mhm.
you think about it, right? Like you can walk back, all right, I make X amount of money per year, or I want to make X amount of money per year.
Right.
And you can back that down into what does that mean for a week?
Right.
What does that mean for an hour of my time?
Right.
Right. So if I can save you a substantial amount of time, right? Or I can help you generate more money, right? Then it's not
It's a
really
no-brainer.
it's not a cost you're paying, it's an investment that you're making.
Right. And that's the
You know
point
what I
that I
mean?
want that's the point I wanted you to touch on, which you did an excellent job on, because in entrepreneurship, you have to understand that value is created in your client
Yeah, sure.
and your customer, and not necessarily within your company, the revenue that's coming back to you. So
Yeah.
once you understand creating value in that person or that client,
Yeah.
you'll understand that the revenue will come back to you tenfold,
Absolutely.
literally tenfold. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah, man. So and the last thing I would say about the whole like AI agent piece is you don't have to start with an agent, right?
Mhm.
Like I actually think just understanding AI, understanding generative AI,
Okay.
prompt engineering is like the term, like when you learn how to like go out and uh like interact with chat GPT
Right.
in a way that gives you better output,
Mhm.
right? Like there's hundreds, thousands of free resources all over the internet that will help you do that better,
Okay.
right? I think it's really important that all of us, entrepreneurs, employees, no matter who you are, like this technology is literally going to touch every single facet of our lives.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's really important to understand it at a base level, right? And then once you understand it, then you can figure out how you want to leverage it in your business,
Okay.
right? And then you got to make a decision about whether you want to spend the time trying to learn all the different facets that you need in order to actually implement that thing. And then even when you implement it, you might not be implementing it correctly.
Right.
Or then you come to somebody like me,
Okay.
right?
So it's still up to that person initially to gather all that data, gather all those facts, gather all those things,
You got to understand it first, man.
and then taking it to somebody like you to
Yeah.
spit back to
Yeah.
that person, okay, this is what
And help you
it could look
figure
like.
out what it can look like, right?
Right.
And I would say there's a lot of people, as with anything, there's a lot of what do they call it? Snake oil salesmen,
Right, right,
right?
right.
I would say, like, in terms of why you should pick me, right? If we're talking to the audience,
Right.
that there's lots of people on Instagram, there are
Mhm.
lots of people everywhere talking about AI,
Mhm.
right? I have worked inside of the largest tech company in the
Right,
world
right,
who kind of spearheaded AI and many of these technologies that have created chat GPT and those things. And I'm working with the smartest people every day.
right.
And I'm working with big companies implementing these things. And so I'm not just some guy,
You're credible.
you know what I mean, who can like teach you how to prompt chat
Right,
GPT, right? Like
right.
I am a certified professional machine learning engineer.
Wow,
Not only do I know how to use chat GPT, I know how to build those kinds of
wow.
things, right? And so I've been in the trenches, I'm still there. And I think that that's the difference, right? Like you want to work with people who actually know what they're doing, right? And they actually understand this
Right,
because there's going to be a lot of people telling you they can do a lot of things for you.
right,
You know what I'm saying?
right.
And
What's the
so, yeah,
credentials? What's the end
what's the
product?
credentials?
And what are your clients
Yeah,
saying?
what do people say about you, right? Like,
Right.
and so yeah, that would be like my own little shameless plug as to like what separates me from others in this space,
Right.
right? Is that I got the credibility, man. I got the referrals. I got 50 people you can reach out to
And
that'll
that's
tell you,
huge.
yeah.
That's huge. That's
And
huge.
so yeah,
And I want to, yeah. So that I'm glad you said that, because for me, a lot of people, come up to me, ask me about Airbnb and want consulting service and all that.
yeah,
And I hit them, I say, well, what's your motivation for doing Airbnb? What's your motivation for doing short term? And the first thing most people say is, I want to make some money.
Yeah, man.
And I'm like, if your agenda is going into any business venture, not just short-term rentals
Yeah.
or AI tech or anything of that nature, is money motivated, you're starting off on the wrong foot.
Man,
You know?
sure,
So I'm like,
100%.
let's understand your mindset. Let's see where you want to grow from, what do you want to do with it,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah.
The money's gonna come.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to
100%.
teach and instill in people. So
100%.
if this definitely does turn into some type of course that you're going to help me with and build and all behind the scenes stuff,
Yeah.
that I want to be fully transparent with my audience, with my clients, that I'm learning this new process as well,
Yeah.
going through the journey together, and we're going to grow with it together. So, like, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man. I would say you just hit on something really important, which
Right.
is, you know, even for me, like when I think about my motivations around like why I'm talking about this and why
Right.
I'm doing the things that I'm doing, like the money's gonna come. For me, it's about helping people solve problems
There you
and to
go.
really be more of like a shepherd,
Right.
right? Because this is a really crazy time and it's moving very fast.
Mhm.
Every day, every week, there's some new AI thing that is coming. And if
Right.
you're a business owner, you're probably like, yo, what am I supposed to be doing right now? What is this stuff?
On top of
What of, you know what I mean, on top of running your business, right?
right.
So for me, I'm just really passionate about like technology and how that helps people run their businesses, right?
Mhm.
Like, and even my own life is a testament of that, man.
Wow.
You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? And how like being exposed to technology kind of changed the trajectory of my own life. And I
Wow.
want to help other people to do that.
Well, it's the same thing with me, man. I'm glad you said that because helping people it gives you a different type of fulfillment.
Yeah, man.
You know, once again, I know I keep harping on the money issue, but the money will come, and I try to instill people, help people
Yeah.
solve their
If you help
problems,
people
and they
solve
will pay you
problems, they'll
for it.
pay you.
They
And if it's
gladly
a,
pay you for
and
it.
if it's a big enough problem, they'll pay you
They'll
a bigger sum of
there
money.
you
You know
go.
what I
There you
mean?
go. And it flows amongst all. I mean, one person gets it, they're going to testify or you'll give testimony to the next
Yeah,
person.
man.
How did
Yeah.
you do? And then it just starts overflowing, man.
Yeah, man. I think there's some book I read, and I've actually heard this in several different places, but I
Right.
think like the salary or whatever money you're paid is directly proportional to the size of the problems or the
Mm,
number of people that you're impacting.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? And so starting anything from that selfish sort of departure point,
right.
I mean, you know, you might make some money and you might make a lot of money in the short term. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? But in terms of like long term,
How do you sustain it?
like how do you sustain it? You know,
Right.
like that can only be done with true authenticity.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
people know they can feel it.
Right.
You know what
And
I
I
mean?
don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I know it's somewhere along the lines like most new small businesses fall within those
90%.
right 3 to 5 years.
90%, bro.
I mean, so it has to
Yeah.
be some strategy to it other than a shiny
Yeah.
object product or service that you can sell to the masses up front.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, bro, as you well know, and now we're kind of going into more like the entrepreneurship journey.
Yes.
Like, as you well know, as anybody that's ever grown a business knows, bro, that shit is hard. You
Right.
know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like,
Right.
it seems easy from the outside, but
Truth.
I've never done anything harder.
Right.
You know what I mean? And ultimately, your why has to push you through those hard days, bro.
Man.
And money is not enough.
Not it. And
You
look,
know what I'm saying? Like, cause it's gonna get hard, bro. It's gonna be like failures.
right.
You're gonna fuck up some projects. You're gonna fuck up things,
Right.
right? And you
Right.
gotta be able to like shake it off and come
Right.
back.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the only thing that's gonna keep you going is a really strong motivation. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying?
Yep.
And
Yep.
like, yeah, bro, it's tough, man. It's hard, bro. Like, it's hard. You gotta. I actually feel like, you know, people always be like, "Oh, Pat, man, you're so smart, man."
And he is.
And
Don't let him be too humble.
nah, well, I think that like when it comes to business though, smart isn't what like makes you successful.
That's true.
What makes you successful is like, what do you call that? Resilience?
Yeah.
Like, bro, you got to be able to get punched in your face over and over and over
Right.
again.
And not afraid of the word no.
And
You're gonna
you
get
gotta be
told
told
no
no
over, trust me,
over and
over and
over
over
again,
again.
more than you hear
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And you gotta have an unshakable faith in yourself, dog.
Right.
That shit is gonna work out, but you gotta be humble enough to learn from the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard as bro, it's hard, man. It's hard, bro. And money isn't enough. You know what I mean? Because like you can go other places and make money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, why are you starting a business? There's got to be a bigger why to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And once people understand that and change that mindset, I'm not gonna say it makes it easier, but they understand that, okay, going through these trials and tribulations, what's the end goal?
For a purpose.
What's the purpose of my
For a
doing
purpose,
this?
man.
Whether it's freedom, whether it's time, whether it's
Yeah.
whatever that drive is, you got to continue to look back at that and say, okay,
Yeah.
that's why I'm working, not just traditional 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's why I'm working after work to put in these extra time, these extra hours.
Well, it's hard.
That's why I'm
It's tired.
getting 7 and 8 no's in a
Yeah.
day for no pay,
Yeah.
no residuals behind it. So having that mindset, man, is
Yeah.
priceless.
Yeah. So yeah, bro, it's like you got to do that, man. And I think that's I don't know if you learn that or I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's definitely learned behavior. I think, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. It's the willingness to want to shift that mindset,
And being
and surrounding yourself with people,
yeah,
that's not necessarily share that same mindset, but maybe share them same values.
yeah, absolutely.
So
And you got to be okay looking stupid. Like I kind of feel like that is the price you pay.
Right.
Like that's the cost of entry.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you got to be okay looking stupid, embarrassing yourself, not doing things right.
Right.
That's the cost of entry that you got to pay in order to be in the game.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people, dare I say, a lot of black people, you know what I'm saying, are too attached to looking cool.
Hey, man.
You know what I'm
Hey,
saying?
man,
They
you gonna
don't
touch some nerves,
yeah,
man.
they don't
You gonna
know
touch
how to
some
like
nerves.
be comfortable not being cool, right?
Right,
Like, because
right.
coolness is so important to
Right.
us and such a value.
Part of our
to us, dog.
culture.
It's a part of who we are,
Right,
bro. Like,
right.
and like entrepreneurship is the opposite of that.
Mm.
Like, you look cool on the other side of it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? But when you starting out and you got your ugly ass website and you just got an idea,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? And you ain't really getting no money,
Right.
and people looking at you like, oh, this your little bit. You know what I mean? Like
The
you
wordplay.
are uncool.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think a lot of people their ego can't take it. You know what I'm saying? And that's why they stop. Right? They can't take it.
And that's why you got to have I'll tell people, like I say, as we do more of these videos, these conversations, we're going to dive deeper into the construction of entrepreneurship and what all that goes into that. It's just not delivering a service or product, getting a return.
No.
You have a strong support system that helps you get through those
Yeah,
hardness
yeah.
that Patrick is talking
Yeah,
about.
you
that you're
gotta have
talking about.
friends that speak into you, man.
Right.
that believe in
It's
you.
necessary.
A good spouse, good partner.
Right. That's another word right there.
Yeah, man, you gotta have somebody that's gonna like, speak that life into you. Cause I
Right.
know there are definitely days, bro, where I come home and it's been a hard day or a hard week,
Right,
bro.
right.
And I'm not feeling so great about myself. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And at those moments, I'm lucky enough to have a wife who's kind of like, bro, you are amazing.
Right.
Don't forget it.
And he has
Yeah.
a wife that's most people would dream of, bro.
Yeah, oh
So,
man. Yeah, man, I'm lucky.
so I mean, you have a
I'm lucky,
strong support system,
I'm
man.
lucky, man.
So definitely, I do too as well. I have a pleasure of meeting Patrick and his beautiful bride, and they have a great dynamic, guys. So
Yeah,
if
man.
you do get to know him, meet him in person, you will love him and his whole dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's the probably thing I'm most proud of, bro. Like I would say,
Right.
Forget the business, forget, the career. The thing I'm most proud of, bro, is probably the relationship that I have with my wife and
That's
with
fantastic.
my son,
That's
man. You know what I
fantastic.
mean? Because like I know so many people who
Don't have
hate their wives, bro.
Hey, look, that's a whole
You know
other
what I'm saying?
podcast, man. We can dive into that till we blue in the face.
Yeah,
You
man, but
know,
it's important, though.
it
I
is
feel like your
important.
personal life, and some I feel like my mentor told me this in college, and I was probably too young to really understand it.
Mhm.
But I do absolutely evaluate people on this, right?
Okay.
Like your personal life and how much control, like how chaotic or not, right? Like how stable it is impacts your professional life.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And I typically will not do business with somebody that like has a chaotic personal life, right? Because that tells me about you.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
If
It
you're gonna
tells
do it
me
in your
about
personal life, you're gonna bring it into the
you're gonna
professional.
bring it and it's gonna seep in. It's
Right.
gonna seep into your professional life, right? Because
True.
I'm gonna need you to show up on time.
Mm.
I'm gonna need you to be able to deliver no matter what's happening around you.
Yeah.
And what I don't want to hear is, oh, well, you know, me and my baby mama we were arguing,
Right.
and you know, I ended up going to jail. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because ultimately, I don't care about any of that. I
Look,
care
we
about,
had-
did you do the thing that I am paying you to do?
and that's
Did you do
business.
the thing that I'm expecting for you to
Right.
do? Because I got to go turn that into somebody else,
Right.
right? And so for me, and that also just says something about you,
Right.
right? Even
It's
little
a respect
things.
factor.
Yeah, it's a respect factor. Do you show up on time?
Look, man, and
Right?
I'm glad
Like,
you said that time factor.
yeah,
You know, even in my consulting one-on-ones or meetings or whatever the case be, I judge people initially
man.
off, let me see if they can just follow a certain time. We all got to follow time.
Yeah, man.
Nobody can outrun it. Nobody can slow it down. So a simple, look, we're meeting here at 1 p.m. on an agreed time.
Yeah.
And if you can't make that time, that deadline, that speaks volumes
Yeah, because it
of
means
how we are moving forward.
it means you don't have control over yourself.
And respect.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you don't have control over yourself. Right?
Mm.
Nothing is a better indicator of you having the ability to lead other people than the ability to lead yourself on a day-to-day.
Wow, that's a word.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so if you can't get up on time, right? If you don't have your life in control in such a way that you can make it somewhere on time, if you're not observant enough to like know, like, okay, I might need to leave a little bit early because there
Right.
may be some traffic. Let me just put a little bit of padding time into this just in case something happens.
Right.
Right.
9 times out of 10, something probably is going to happen.
Probably gonna happen. But
Right.
even if it doesn't, then you just got there early. But if you're not the type of person who's thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead,
Right.
then you're probably not the type of person that I want to do business with.
And that's and it boils down to discipline as well.
Absolutely.
And I tell people, if you can't manage those little things, you're not ready to be an entrepreneur. I'm gonna tell you that
things
up front. And I tell people, and bringing it back to full circle one time with the Airbnb and the short-term rental space, I tell people all the time, if you're not going to be customer service based, tend to that client's needs,
Yeah, you
tend to
gotta
the little
swallow a
things,
lot of-
you got to swallow a lot of pride.
Yeah,
And if you can't do that, you're going to be out of business. You're not
Absolutely.
even going to get started good
Yeah.
before that thing is in shambles.
Absolutely.
So you said a word right there with that
Yeah,
time.
man. So yeah, personal life's really important, man.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think like I'm often just observing people and how they
Mhm.
go about their personal life, right? Because
Right.
your values are your values, no
Mhm.
matter if it's business or personal, right? Like
Right.
people like to say, oh, well, this, you know, they try to think about business and personal as being two different things.
Mm-mm.
There's nothing more personal than business.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? There's nothing more personal than us like sharing money
Right.
and me counting on you for something.
Right.
Because I got to feed my family. What's more personal than that? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, what's more personal than that?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I can disagree with you even if I wanted to, because that's truth. And once people understand that, once they understand that concept, they have, in my opinion, conquered one of the first steps of being successful in their venture, whatever it is. You can apply it across the board. So, like you say, showing up on time,
Yeah,
being respectful, discipline, all that is the blueprint
Yeah.
for all of it. Like you said, when you talked about the AI agents and all that, you can't help me do any of that if I don't give you
If
at
you
least a
don't-
baseline of information
you got to know
to
your
bring it all
business
together.
well enough.
And it's not for you
Yeah.
to, follow up behind me to make sure that I have it or want to
Yeah.
give it back to you.
Well, look, I say no to clients all the time. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
people that want to work with me.
Right,
And I
right.
say no because I would rather say no and have you be a little upset with me now than for us to get to working together.
Mhm.
And then you're really gonna be upset with me.
Right,
Right? Because I can already tell, like, okay, you're not really ready for what I'm asking for because
Right.
you're not prepared. You know what
Right,
I'm saying?
right.
Like, yeah, man, I say no to people all the time. They think they want a thing, but they're not really ready to even.
And that's,
Yeah,
I would assume, what is that, probably money driven behind it, or they just see the fruit behind it, but they don't see the root.
they see the fruit, right? Like,
Right.
you know, they want me to work with them, and sometimes it's just the fact that like they don't. You know, I think our biggest blind spots are internally, right? Like
Mm.
we don't often know our own shortcomings, right? And
Right,
so
right.
like I can recall recently that I went to a meeting and this guy was looking for some investment,
Mhm.
you know, and I'm asking him questions and like, you know, I gave him the feedback like, bro, it took you too long to explain what it is that you do and what you need.
Right.
And the fact that it took you that long lets me know that you don't really know your business intimately enough.
Mm.
right? So go back and do a little bit more work.
And that's
right. Because I can tell you right now how, like, I know exactly how much money coming in and out of my business.
right.
I know what my expenses are. I know what it's probably going to be every month. Right. I know,
You
like,
know your stuff.
I know my business.
Right.
Like, and that's at work. That's in my own personal business. I know because I measure it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of people that they just don't have that knowledge of their business. And if you don't have that knowledge of your business, then how are you going to expect me to come in and then like implement something into your business and you can't really articulate what the actual problem is?
Mm,
You can't really articulate how much money you actually make per month on an average, right? Like you can't really tell me how much time you spend on a thing, right? Like, and if you can't answer those questions, then how can we work
Go back
together?
to the drawing board.
Yeah, like you need to go back and do a little bit more homework
Right.
and then come back to me when you're ready for that.
Right.
Right. Like,
And you're hitting on so much stuff I wish we can dive into, because some of the entrepreneur things that you're touching on is having, which essentially a team of people to help you out with those numbers, help you out with those things that you're not expertise in. And those people
can't be
think
an expert in
entrepreneurs,
everything.
they're good at providing a service and job, and that's what they're good at. But like
Yeah.
you say, when you're turning into a business, you got to think about things like taxes, payroll, employees, client,
Yeah, man.
service base, seasons. All these things play into being an entrepreneur that you're touching on that I want to dive into. Maybe, like I say, probably won't happen on this episode.
Yeah.
But definitely me and you're going to have more conversations, man, diving into that.
Man, I saw this quote that I really liked recently, and it was true fortune lies in the agency of others. Right. And what that means is if you really want to get to the bag, bro, you have to utilize other people. You find people who are smarter than you at other things, right? You figure out what's the thing that you do that actually provide, like the thing that you do that brings value to the business,
Right.
and then you do that all the time. And then what you do is you find other people. You find a good accountant. You find a good bookkeeper. You know what I mean? You find all these other people to support your business, and you let them do what they do, right? But you got to build a team. There's, nothing great has been done alone.
And look, once again, bringing it personal, I tell people all the time that in Airbnb, I don't care how good your listing is. I don't care what your price point is. I don't care how nice your furniture and all that is. If you don't have a good cleaner, whether you're going to do it yourself or hire a cleaner, if you don't have a good cleaner, that whole Airbnb listing is not going to survive itself.
Just that one thing is going to break you down.
Yes. So either you learn how to be the best cleaner you can be, which I don't advise, because then you're not too much time and you're taking away from the things, the day-to-day of the business. But you go out there and find that cleaner that understands where you want to go with it, and you hire them to do what they're great at and bring it all in. And most people don't understand that or see that because that's money going out versus the return that they're going to get.
But again, it's an investment, right? So this going back to that whole like entrepreneurship is hard. So I think there's a difference between information and knowledge, right? So when you tell somebody that, you're giving them information, but knowledge is going through it yourself, and then you know.
Ooh, and then a step from that is wisdom, which is applying that knowledge.
Yeah, and so I think like a lot of people, and that's the hard part about entrepreneurship, is that like you got to go through those things yourself, right? Like, well, some people are really smart and they leverage the experience of others, but I've kind of felt that most people, even when you tell them something, they still got to experience it. You know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of times that's what really takes a long time when it comes to building a successful business.
Wow.
It's going through those experiences, right? And learning how to do that, learning how to build a team, hiring somebody and then making a bad hire and having to get rid of them.
Trust me, I know about
right? Like you kind of learn how to hire people. Right. And then you get a good hire, but then you lose them because you don't know how to coach.
And that's learned because
you don't know how to keep them, like you don't know how to keep them there.
Right.
And so there's all these things that you got to like, I feel like every time that you get a new answer, there's a new question that comes behind it.
Trust.
And that's kind of like the process of entrepreneurship is like getting the answer to question number one and then there being question number two, because now you know a new question to ask. And you just keep doing that over and over and over and over and over again. And eventually you get enough answers to where you start making some money. But the questions never stop.
And the question, trust me, the question. And look, all the way from clients, all the way up to your behind the scenes people, the questions are never. And that has majority of that has nothing to do with the product or
It has
service
nothing
you're
to do
selling.
with delivering the service. This
You
is
know?
all, bro. I honestly feel like, man, marriage
Mm,
and running a business are all about self-discovery,
mm,
and you can only do those as well as you know yourself.
wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Wow.
you can only be as good of a husband as you have self-knowledge.
Mm,
You can only be as good of an entrepreneur and a CEO and a boss as you have self-knowledge,
wow.
right?
Yep.
And as you get better at those things and you learn more about who you are and what your weaknesses are, then you correct those and you learn what you like and what you don't like and
Right.
what you're good at. Like that's like nothing teaches you more about yourself than running a business except for marriage.
Like I'm speechless on that. Because what you're saying is true. You know, I've had the privilege of being married. I've had the privilege of having a great, successful marriage. And what you're saying is true. The two go hand in hand.
Man, man,
Hand in hand.
there's it's not a coincidence, bro,
Wow. Wow.
that most of the successful business people and politicians are married. That's not a coincidence.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like you
mm,
got some every now and then that aren't, right? Like, but for the most part, they either are married or they have been married because you learn a whole ton about working with others for a
right.
common goal,
Right.
learning how to communicate effectively without being like adversarial,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
and not
Learn to listen.
learning to listen.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
all of those things, right? Like really, really pay off and help when you're running a business.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And so they go hand in hand, man.
Man.
And isn't business a form of marriage?
It is.
You know,
It's a partnership. It's multiple partnerships with
multiple partners.
whether it's your clients, your customers,
Yep.
city officials, whatever you want to. It's some form of partnership within
People, man.
that form of that venture. So
Yeah, 100%.
wow. Well, Pat, look, man, this has been great.
Yeah. Thank
I
you
don't
for
know
having
where
me,
we're at
man.
on time, but I appreciate you coming on the first episode, the first video, and
Man,
it's
you're gonna
been a
do this.
pleasure. It's been an honor. Look, and I want you guys to follow our journey. Because like I say, I'm literally taking what he talked about in those AI agents, and I'm going to implement it into what I do in the short-term rental space and in our business. Like I say, it's going to be some words at the bottom of the video that shows and talks about my business and where you can find out about us in detail. But I definitely want to give you the opportunity to where how people can find you
Yeah.
if you want to share that information.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So techpeerconsulting.com is my
Okay.
business. TechPeer is the Instagram. Also, you can follow my personal Instagram, which is Bentley_Patrick.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so if you have questions, I really love talking about this. I love working with business owners, and so if you're interested, follow me on social media. I'm sharing little tidbits, but also feel free to reach out if you have an idea or something that you want to explore.
Hey man, look, well, I appreciate it, brother. And like I say, we will be diving into more episodes, more videos. We're going to go more in depth on entrepreneurship, how I got to where I am, and just having a conversation. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you,
Hey, bro,
brother. And
always a
we will
pleasure,
go from
man.
there.
Yeah.